Welcome back to another episode of Game Time Discussions. My name is Cameron Selby with Emory Cuzzy. We're continuing our series of offseason outlooks based on divisions. Today we're going to be doing the AFC West, so talking about the Chargers, the Raiders, the Chiefs, and the Broncos. Seems like it's been a pretty consistently results over the last few years between all of them. Kansas City's kind of run the show. So we'll see if there's any teams that have a possibility of catching up. Let's see if the Chiefs have a possibility of being the first team to three-peat, all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a division that I guess goes around and is talked about in my family a lot because my mom is a Broncos fan, so I have to give her updates as much as possible on what they're doing. And then me and my dad are Raiders fans. So it's just one of those divisions where both of our teams are at the bottom. You know, we kind of just hang out at the bottom. We've been doing that. This year, we were above the Chargers. Still didn't make the playoffs, but I thought there was a lot of good things and a lot of building points that we can talk about. Coaching changes throughout this, division. And then also, just like these cap hits and these things that we're going to have to see teams work around and figure out is going to be one of the biggest talking points in this division for sure. So, let's get started. The lowest team in this division was probably one of the biggest surprises out of all teams throughout the whole NFL. The Chargers, probably were one of the teams that we expected to make the playoffs, compete for winning this division, and that didn't happen. They probably flipped their record from what we expected to 5-12 instead of 12-5. But they have a lot of decisions to make this offseason, and first decision they made, of course, was hiring Harbaugh from Michigan, who just won a national championship. He'll come in and bring his regime. So I think that it's going to be a very interesting start to the year for sure. But everything that happens in free agency will really be telling on how they want to play football.
Right. And it seems like every year there's a team or two that catches the injury bug. Somehow, some way, the Chargers hit it 2 years in a row. 2 years ago, we had Justin Herbert early in the year banged up. They lost Rashawn Slater very early in the season. Joey Bosa got hurt. Derwin James was banged up, and then they still had a good playoff run. Had a disappointing end with their collapse against the Jags, but came into this season with a lot of expectations to at least hit that level as first round exit, maybe get to the divisional round, leap over somebody, but it seemed like the injury bug hit even worse. Justin Herbert actually had a season-ending injury this time. Joey Bosa, once again, he just has not been able to stay healthy since he got his record extension a couple of off seasons ago. So, they just really had a rough year with the injury bug. Mike Williams tearing his ACL as well, just to name a few. So, yeah, it's really unfortunate that it happens, but sometimes those are kind of big blessings because it kind of helps force your hand at decisions that it's like you look at the numbers, and even after the cap got inflated 15 million more than expected, they're still 22 over the cap right now, and they still have to make decisions. Like we've said in the previous videos, it's like Joey Bosa versus Khalil Mack, both of them over 30 million cap hits. Somebody's got to go. And then you got Keenan Allen, you got Mike Williams, both $30 million cap hits. Somebody's got to go. But compared to the Dolphins, who didn't really have a lot of flexibility outside of, they just designated Xavier Howard as a post-June 1st cut to try to, expand the, I guess, cap hit that they'll take. They actually have... They'll gain some space pretty instantly if they move off of any of those pieces. I'm not saying that they're going to move off the majority of them or all of them, but it seems like they're going to have some decisions to make.
Yeah. Well, and of course, I think Mike Williams is probably the one we look to because of his injury last year and his injury that he had prior to that. So I think that, he's he's making more money than what we would expect based on the injury history he's had. He's been a great player when he's healthy, but he just can't stay healthy, and that makes it really hard.
And also comparing the styles of which the receiver that Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are. Keenan Allen, his the way he plays receiver is more sustainable to have some longevity,
Right.
whereas Mike Williams is more of a deep threat, go up and get it guy, and if you're just breaking down via injury, it's kind of hard to do those things well. And I know Keenan Allen's older, but he still plays out of the slot, is a phenomenal route runner still. And if you're able to build around him to where he's not just getting 30% of the target share like we've seen in the past, like I think he can age well at that position. Maybe if a lower cap hit would be more ideal, but that's just kind of my thinking on if they were to have a decision, who would you go with? On top of that, Quinn Johnston, who was drafted with them last year, is more of a Mike Williams-esque receiver than he is a Keenan Allen receiver. So complementing one another, it'd be really hard to picture Mike Williams and Quinn Johnston, two of the same style of receiver.
Right. And I also think, on that point, Quentin Johnston would actually have to be, if that was the situation, I think he'd probably be their slot. Because I don't think Josh Palmer ran a single snap in the slot in the last. Well, I mean, he probably ran some snaps in the slot, but I don't think they were natural snaps.
Yeah, it was based on need because of people going down.
Yeah, rather than him actually being a slot receiver. So, I think that and you could also see a situation where they restructure Keenan Allen's deal, find some cap because of it. And I did want to preface a disclaimer on this whole thing. The cap changes throughout these videos, so we already did the videos on the old on the other divisions, on some of the other divisions. We're going in and we'll add descriptions in the chat based on if they've changed cap salary or cap and stuff, because we just got the news yesterday that they were going to increase the cap.
And also, like, franchise tags are starting to become official, and like T. Higgins this morning was just announced that he's likely to be tagged, and so that's already being accounted to the cap. Fortunately for this division, we don't have to be number manipulation because that doesn't really affect the West. But just going forward, just kind of be a little flexible, just because we're recording this right before all of this craziness is about to happen.
Yeah, and we want to record this because we want to show y'all how teams are doing business throughout this offseason. That's kind of the point, is like to kind of give y'all an insight also in like how teams kind of work the back end. Derek Carr's for the Saints. The Saints had the worst cap out of all teams in NFL. They had to do something, and so they restructured Derek Carr's contract so that he got more signing bonus and it was less of a cap hit. Things like that, the little nuances that you miss because football is so intricate, and there's 32 teams and each team is really focused on themselves, and we also sometimes have a harder time following what's happening until it's official. So definitely want to make sure everybody understands that the cap is always changing. And we try to keep up and explain to y'all exactly what's going on as much as possible.
Right. So like you said previously, Jim Harbaugh coming back to the NFL. He's had previous stints, both as a player and as a coach. Led the pretty incredible story as a coach to me, going from Stanford, making that from just a nothing program to building it up to one of the Pac-12 favorites, and was one of the biggest reasons that UFC had such a down, decade in their last, stint in the Pac-12. Then he went to San Fran, led them to the Super Bowl, and then go into Michigan, who hadn't been prominent for many, many years, and then wins a national championship.
Right.
Obviously, he's not going to have the accolades that Nick Saban has, where he just built a dynasty and it's just unprecedented run that will never be repeated. But he's more about the just starting from the ground up and just building something into a great program, which is what I love about him so much. And so he's also bringing his defensive coordinator, Jesse Minter, who had Michigan for consecutive years, one of the best nationally, putting out so many NFL prospects over the last couple of seasons. So it's kind of very interesting coming in, a lot of people said that the Chargers wouldn't be a great job because of the lack of flexibility.
Right.
But at the same time, you already have the stars. They've just been underachieving.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just need the guy to right the wrongs. And a lot of times it seems like they just were beating themselves with the positions that they would put themselves in towards the end of the games.
I think you were talking about the new DC, and he's done such a good job in the secondary. Is like particularly, I look at you can look at how Michigan did. Their secondary had 3 or 4, maybe 5 guys that could all be high league regarded draft picks.
Mm-hmm. And Will Johnson would be a first round pick, but he's not even eligible for the draft.
And so. Mike Sandersill, he's in this draft. He's going to be probably the best nickel. I project him to be the best nickel in this class, like a true nickel. So he just constantly puts out, really good DBs. And guess what? He gets a great group of DBs when he gets there. So I don't think Mike Davis will be there. I think that'll be one of the guys that has to go because of inconsistency. There was just some games where, they were picking on Mike Davis because on the other side, you have Asante Samuel Jr., and he played great. He's been playing great since he got in the league. Derwin James is the best safety in the league. True. To me, I think he's the best safety in the league. And he has been underwhelming, and it's been really hard to watch. He's had injuries, things like that, being a Florida State fan, watching him go there, getting excited about it, and then him just not reaching his potential, even knowing he's been an all-pro. Like he hasn't reached his potential, and he's been a 2-3 time all-pro. Mm-hmm. That type of thing is something that I think can be found with the new regime. So
exactly. And then also from the offensive side, they're going to be changing up schematically a little bit because, they go from Kellen Moore, who's more of like a, run it downfield, mm-hmm. score a lot of points, whereas Greg Roman took a year off, but he was with the OC with the Baltimore Ravens from 2020 to 2022, and all 3 years, top 3 in rush attempts, top 3 in rushing production. They just want to establish the run. Look what Jim Harbaugh came from and how Michigan just had a 2-headed monster for the last couple of years with Donovan Edwards, like Corum, mm-hmm. who's in this class. And it just seems like that's the focus that they want to go. They don't really have the money to spend on one of these high-quality free agents unless something, crazy happens, like a Saquon Barkley or Josh Jacobs or something of that nature. Yeah. But that just seems like the direction that they're going to go, whereas we've kind of been accustomed to seeing Austin Eckler be a fantasy guy as a scat back over mm-hmm. the last couple of years. So it's going to be interesting to see schematically how all that kind of comes together. I don't know if it'll be instantaneously overnight, but it seems like that's kind of the direction that they're wanting to go.
And that's another thing we talk about, we talk about how running backs can be, so I'm a believer in don't draft a first round running back. I'm a believer in you can find running backs, and we've talked about we'll talk about Isaiah Pacheco. There's guys that you can find later in the draft. There's guys that you can find that are serviceable to do the job, or 2 guys that do the job together. And I don't think that, you necessarily have to pay a guy. Of course you want to, but if you have the cap, you don't have the cap, you can't do it. Austin Eckler is going to be a casualty, I'm sure, this year, and not come back. And I expect them to probably try to find, as much as I hate to say this, I bet I could see Blake Corum making it on this team because of the head coach and, coming to his old head coach. Mm-hmm. And it's not like he's going to have to pay some pretty penny for him. Yeah. A 4th round pick, probably, something like that. And so I could see that happening also. And we're going to have a different type of running game. You were talking about the Ravens with Greg Roman. They had 3 or 4 guys, that just kind of came in and just ran the ball whenever. Mm-hmm. Even like this year, the Ravens, it was reset. The ground was set back then. Now they have, Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, J.K. Dobbins, if he
just had 2 straight years of
and then
awful.
A 4th guy, Keaton Mitchell, who did great. So you just got to think, if they can set up the correct offense, the style, they aren't going to need first, second rounders to do get 3, 4, 5 yards of carry based on just using the O-line correctly and doing other things like that.
And then also with the depth at the position, in free agency, not all of those guys are going to get paid or big deals or the things that they want. We see when there's an abundance or a surplus of talent at a certain position, there's about 2 or 3 guys that either have to go back to the situations they were at or have a short-term prove-it deal to try to maximize the following year. And, you have a guy like Devin Singletary, which I'm not saying schematically that's the best fit for this situation, but he's 5'7", miniature running back that we're just kind of like, he's just a guy. And then he was just killing him for Houston to end the year. So he's like the 8th or 9th best at his position in this free agency class. So that just kind of shows any of those guys can really come in and make an instant impact. It'll just be interesting to see what kind of direction they go, because I don't think currently the rest of the guys on the roster are fit to handle a full-time workload.
I think we'll expect a 1A, 1B type of thing in this situation for sure. They also, since the Chargers were 4th in the West, they will inherit a very much easier schedule than other teams will. They're going to have the 5th easiest schedule for next year. And that's something that can't be overlooked, especially when you have a team that underperformed, getting that schedule plus, first, they're going to get the number 5 overall draft pick, things like that. It will help them to also vault.
Yeah, only having in a 17-game schedule, only playing 6 playoff teams. And like, that's just an incredible thing to have. And we'll see where that goes. But it's really easy to look at them and be like, of all the candidates to be worst to first, I don't know. I'm not saying that they could leapfrog Kansas City just like that, but they should instantly be a favorite to be one of the wild cards at the very least going into next offseason, despite having cap issues, which you don't really see nowadays. But that's just how much talent is on this roster. And because of their down year, they have such a good draft capital that they could just make some instant impact starters make it work.
Right. I think that they have the cap. Like, the cap issues are there because of the fact that they already have players on their roster that are good at football. Like, they already have a number 1 receiver. They already have a really good quarterback. They already have
great left
tackle. They have
edge rusher.
Yeah, 2 edge rushers. Kenneth Murray, good linebacker.
We'll see if they'll retain him, but so it'll be interesting. And we've said in previous videos that the 5th pick is really a good debate, but regardless, they're in a spot to have a really good instant impact player.
Yeah, they could have, they get their pick, basically, a position. They're not most likely going to get Marvin Harrison, so wide receiver might not be the best way for them to go unless they think that one of the other 2 is really amazing. Right tackle, moving a guy possibly from left to right in Joe Alt. And then also we talk about Brock Bowers being an option if they want to get another playmaker that will help them in the run game, even with the blocking ability.
For sure.
But yeah, so let's move on. We're going to jump over to the Denver Broncos, and we're going to talk about their problems and big debacle that they have going on with their quarterback situation. Russ will not be their starter or even in town, most likely.
Yeah, it's almost a certainty that you can't bench somebody for Jared Stidham and just expect that he's gonna be your starter next year.
Right.
And if they were to move on, it'd be $85 million cap hit, whether they eat it all this year or split it over the next 2. It more than double is the largest cap hit in the NFL history by a single player. It's a rough situation to be in, but it's kind of, this is one of those that it's just, you don't expect a ton this offseason. They're just kind of gonna eat their crow and make this a multi-year process, because that's all you can do with the kind of hand you've been dealt after the Russell Wilson deal not moving or working out in their favor.
Yeah, this is one of the biggest. I think this is one of the easiest expectations of like being a down team. We've seen them in the past have really good defenses. They actually weren't as good as we expected this year, which was kind of surprising. But at the end of the day, like, they have to figure out how to. $85 million is a lot, and I think you could eat it all to this year, but you're going to miss out on getting guys coming back, free agents. They missed So they have their center, Lloyd Cushenberry, is one of their better players on their line. He'll probably have to walk if they eat it all this year. That'll just be a cap casualty immediately. So things like that that they're going to have to deal with this. So
my thinking is just, it's obviously it makes a lot more sense to divvy it up over 2 years, but if you just know that this is just not going to be your year to contend or even compete much, just bite the bullet and take it all. It'll work out for you more in the long run, especially if you have trust from the organization that no matter how the season goes, if you're Sean Payton, be like, we could be 2-15, but I know I'll be back next year because of the way, they have faith in me. As long as you don't rub people the wrong way, and that he's tended to do in the past, if he can fix that, it's just they don't have a lot of building blocks on that team anymore. They've traded a lot of them away in recent years. Shelby Harris, Bradley Chubb were two of the main blocks. Now they have an All-Pro corner in Patrick Surtain, Justin Simmons, who's kind of getting up there in age. But outside of that, there's really nothing that's just like, oh yeah, he's going to be there for years to come, at least at this very moment.
So I have a question about this situation then. Do you believe that this is something that I kind of just thought of because of the fact that they'll probably eat this all this year and might be 2-15? Do you think it's a good idea for them to draft a quarterback and bring a young guy into a situation like this? Or do you think it would be better to just say, hey, let's get a piece this year in the draft and then go and get the number 1 overall pick most likely, or number 2 overall pick next year? Because it's not that they're tanking on purpose, but they literally
just kind of by default.
Yeah, by default, they're automatically going to be at the bottom 3 teams in the league.
Yeah, I would expect when Vegas win totals come out next year, their schedule is not the easiest, and they're already kind of lacking assets and pieces. They don't have a second round pick, so anybody that has them trading up into the top 3 year full, that wouldn't make any sense based on what they just gave up to get Russell Wilson, and then the after effects of letting him go this early. So it's kind of like, it just depends on how you feel about the 4th quarterback off the board. Because that's, if you're going to target somebody at 12, you have to have a lot of faith in J.J. McCarthy in the long term, or Michael Penix, to weather the storm and stay competitive and be a future building block. It's a weird spot. It would make more sense to me to trade back, get all assets you can, but that doesn't seem like the direction that they're going to go. It seems like everybody knows that Denver is targeting quarterback early, and they're not going the veteran route because they've recycled so many veterans since Peyton Manning left. They're become the new Cleveland Browns of just quarterbacks that they just can't figure out that position. So I feel like that they know if it's a good class, they need to prioritize that position. And especially with the following class, you're more the college guy expert. Is there anybody that really even compares to this class that would be flirtation of a top 10 pick if they were out this year?
I don't know that I think that there's a number 1 guy that's really just stand out by far over the field. There's no Caleb Williams, there's no Trevor Lawrence in this next class.
Which, that's not saying that there can't be in the future, right? Because you have guys in the recent past, Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix, Joe Burrow, that have one great year and then all of a sudden vault into a top prospect. But at the same time, if you don't really have that vibe that is coming out, or you'll be in the position to take one of those guys. I mean, they still went 8-9 somehow, some way after the atrocious start they had this year, and had a 5-game win streak, and then they lost a couple of kind of what I would say gimmies towards the end of the year, but they were right there towards the end, despite all the issues that they were going through and the murkiness of the quarterback situation. So it's kind of hard to even see them. They could very well be an overachieving team based on the way we are viewing them right now, because if I had to guess, it'd be like a 5-win total, and they could all of a sudden just stay 7-10 or 8-9, just because of good coaching and maximizing what you have around you.
I also think that there is a large drop off from the top 3 quarterbacks to the next, but we just happen to have a draft, and the teams are very needy of quarterback in this draft, and that's also a reason why they might jump on it, just because they know someone else is going to do it in the next pick, maybe even at the Raiders. So that's something that I think that you have to think about too. Is like, this is such a quarterback needy class. Quarterbacks are going to be overdrafted in this class for sure. And I'm sure next year there's going to be multiple quarterback needy teams, but I just don't know if I think the talent at 12 is worth the pick. And that's my dilemma with it, is that a lot of people might have a second round grade on both Penix and McCarthy and Bo Nix. All three of them might have second round grades, right?
I think
because I think
probably should.
That's consensus, I think. But that's a number 12 overall pick to go for a second round guy that you hope pans out after going to a situation that's probably one of the harder situations in the NFL. So that's my thoughts. I just want to know, like, if that makes any sense to you.
No. Obviously, we love doing what would we do mocks and stuff like that. And if we were to kind of just look at the grand scheme of things at this situation, if we were the GM of the Broncos, knowing that this is the multi-year process and you're not in love with any of the quarterbacks at that range, it's probably more ideal to get a building block coming out. Because outside of Garrett Bowles, because of Lloyd Cushenberry being a free agent likely departure, they don't really have any building blocks on their offensive line outside of Garrett Bowles. They had a number 7 line out of nowhere this year, but he's really kind of it at the very moment. So either build in there. Defensively, they just kind of cycled out, the top defense that they had, and then only having 2 building blocks, but both of them are in the secondary. There's edges that will be there. They could get the first edge off the board for all we know. It just kind of depends, and we'll kind of address that at a later time.
Yeah,
but that's just kind of the whole situation with Denver. Is we were talking when we were prepping for this podcast, and we were like, man, Denver doesn't really have a ton of talking points. They screwed up on their quarterback situation. They got to address the quarterback situation. They don't have the money, and they don't really have building blocks. So it's like there's not really much to say for this offseason to how they're going to improve going into next year. It seems like they're the easiest pick to have a regress season. So we'll just kind of see if they prove that theory wrong. But that's just kind of how my outlook of them at the very moment.
Right, of course. I just want to put that idea in your head to think about rather than going quarterback there, because we probably have later grades on them. They've, Latu, Dallas Turner, both those guys could be there. Jared Verse, he probably fits a different scheme better, but you can take your pick of the best guy you want. Anybody. That's my thing too, is like, you might go, maybe Fuaga drops there and you're like, hey, we don't have anybody on our line. Let's get a right tackle. And now we have 2 bookend tackles. So that's kind of my thought. But yeah, Denver is a difficult team. So I think that their best options are eat this money and hopefully make headway in a couple years, rather than expecting to jump into the playoffs this year. Don't I think 5 wins is reasonable. Like you said,
that's a reasonable thing, unless they just kind of come out of the water and make some cap maneuvers and just add pieces that you're just like, how is that possible? So.
It was like San Francisco every year.
Oh yeah.
So, but yeah, let's move on to the Las Vegas Raiders.
The Raiders.
Yeah, it is time to talk about the Raiders. We are moving in the right direction. That's exciting, at least.
Yeah.
We're doing the right things. Every time we have a new head coach, we win games. It's very confusing. Every time we, fire somebody and hire somebody, we win a couple games here and there, and then we're like, oh, this guy might be the guy. And then it's like 3 in a row. We just drop them all, and I'm like, okay, never mind. But I think that we have to address the quarterback position. Jimmy G's not coming back next year, I don't believe.
No, he got released shortly after being announced that he was going to be suspended 2 games.
Yeah.
And because of that suspension, it voided all of his guaranteed money. So they were able to get off scot-free. So it was a good situation in that regard. But at the same time, you still need to figure it out, because since Derek Carr left and you decide to part ways, you let him go Jimmy G comes in expecting to, at the very least, stay lateral, and they instantly found out that that wasn't the answer that they needed.
Aiden is our starter at the moment, and he had definitely a down. I mean, I don't know that it's a downer up year. I mean, Aiden was not expected to play. Later round pick, guy just had to come in and play. But we had one of the worst offenses in the league this last year, and that was really telling. Our rushing offense, which I actually we think about Josh Jacobs as one of the best running backs in the league, and we had a 30th ranked rushing offense this year.
Right. Yeah, it was a huge regression. 2022 led the league in rushing, and then obviously he ended the year out for the final 4 games. But Zamir White still was very serviceable and equalized whatever output that Josh Jacobs would have had, in my eyes, at least. But yeah, taking a huge step back to 30th, running the football, it was not ideal. But I love, personally, from the outside looking in, the energy that Antonio Pierce brings. I really think that he is a positive energy, especially for that style of franchise. Raiders have always kind of been an in-your-face, we're going to talk, we're going to do it, we're going to do things the bad way, and we love it, and we're going to embrace it. And it seemed like Max Crosby is the epitome of that, and he fully embraced, like, he even, as they were searching for a head coach, was like, I won't be back here if you don't bring back Antonio Pierce. Like, he loved him that much. And so that, when you have players buying in, and in the social media realm, you're making those kind of comments when you're essentially the best asset that you have on that team, that speaks volumes. And so that's something that you should be excited about, at least as a fan, going forward.
Well, Max Crosby was our only All-Pro other than our punter, AJ Cole. So, and I love Max, and we can talk about Max all day. And when we were in college, I remember you doing an assignment for class where you had to ask somebody to do a video recording, and I was like, oh, I'll do it. And we talked about the draft. And one of the questions was, who is your favorite pick that we had? And that was the draft, everybody, that we had 3 picks, 3 first rounders. We got Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Abrams, and Clelin Ferrell. And my favorite pick by far was Max Crosby.
4th round pick.
Yep, because watching his film, watching his story, watching all the things that he's gone through to get to the point that he's at, I was like, that's the guy that I want to get behind, know? And of course, I didn't expect him to be an All-Pro. But I expected him to be better and he's a Raider. Like, he is the Raider. And so that was exciting. But the thing is too, is like, we're in a situation where we should progress and get better. And with so much turnaround and so much change, I'm nervous personally because of the fact that we have gone through so many coaches and so many things. Finally, we have a different GM that's going to be drafting for us. We've had some terrible drafts. We're possibly the worst drafting team in the league. And so now we have a new GM that's going to help us hopefully right that ship. So there's a lot of good things. There's a lot of things to look up at. So
right.
That's
and
awesome.
Also the strange thing, obviously the most glaring need is quarterback. They're one of the few teams that aren't really being talked about of drafting one, of being one of the favorites to grab one of these veterans that are obviously available. You talk about Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Kirk Cousins,
right,
what have you. And I feel like they're probably going to go the veteran route in my eyes. I don't see them being aggressive enough to move up to leap Denver or Minnesota, who is probably a favorite to pick one of the 4th or 5th off the board. And I would just really enjoy seeing someone like Justin Fields go to the Raiders, even though that's not really being talked about. I don't know if I can speak that into existence, but I think it would be an ideal fit for him, at least.
I think that would make a lot of sense. I think so. That's my thing, and we've had our own Justin Fields conversations. Also, it's like maybe he wasn't worth the draft capital that he was taken for, but at the same time, he's going to be a serviceable top 15 quarterback in the league. And that's almost, what we need to just get over the hump and get into the playoffs. Mm-hmm. The fun thing about the Raiders is we haven't made the playoffs in a long time. We haven't been like in 2002 when we played the Bucks. And John Gruden was our coach in 2001, goes to the Bucks, beats us in the Super Bowl. We had a slump from there on for a really, really long time, and we're still slumping, obviously. But that allows us, to say, oh, hey, 10-7, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. Like that's a, a proud fan moment. We're finally feel good about it. And I think that the momentum that, Antonio Pierce brings in, the guys we've got, I think we've built a great team. I think we need to bring back guys like Andre James, our center, but I don't know that he'll be back, which is sad because I think he's a true Raider also. And just kind of like retain some of the guys that, got us to this point. Mm-hmm. And hopefully, our 10th place cap will help us.
I mean, when you look at it, they are the only team essentially in the entire division that has cap space. Right now, Denver and the Chargers, as of this moment, are under the cap. Kansas City has cap space, but they have the best defensive tackle in football in my eyes that they need to pay long term. Mm-hmm. And 80% of what they have available is going to him. So they really don't have a ton of cap space to add more than that, at least in the marquee free agent department. The Raiders do. They have nearly $50 million in cap space. They don't really have, other than Devontae Adams and soon to be Max Crosby, big contracts that are just unmovable. I know Devontae was kind of in a lot of trade discussions during the deadline. It seems like that's kind of cooled down, and it's likely that at least at the very start of the year he's going to be there, and just kind of see how it goes depending on how the quarterback situation, the offense, what that looks like moving forward. But there's so many assets that you have, which it seems like it's been a little while since you were able to spend. And I can recall about 5 years ago where the Raiders were bringing in a lot of vets, and they were a contender, actually. And then Derek Carr broke his leg Christmas Day. Mm-hmm. And then it all kind of goes to crap because, you're going into the wild card round without your quarterback. Mm-hmm. And, it's just kind of one of those what if seasons. I'm not saying that they would have made a run, but they were actually really set up well. And then now they had to eat all those contracts. They made some bad draft picks, bad investments, guys like Antonio Brown. And now all that's kind of wiped away. Basically, everybody that was the bad selections have graduated out or are no longer on the roster. So it's kind of like a fresh feel now.
Well, I can name, 6 draft picks that, should be on our roster.
Only 6.
Well, I meant that are 4-year guys, right? So gotcha. You have the 3, you have the Josh Jacobs. He won't be back. Mm-hmm. I don't think we're going to pay him. I don't think it would be wise of us to do that, honestly.
I don't think Zamir White playing as well as he did at the end of the season helped his cause.
Right, so. Exactly. And then so Josh, Jonathan Abrams, Clelin Ferrell, Alex Leatherwood, Henry Ruggs, all these guys, all these names that I just didn't pan out at all. If we had 2 of them, be franchise guys, because they were all first round picks.
Damon Arnett was another one.
Yeah, exactly. It's oh my gosh. Neither Ohio State cornerback panned out that year, so I'm okay with it. But so yeah, I mean, if any of these guys, say 2 of them pan out, we have a much different outlook,
right?
And that's something that tells you a little bit about what I mean by draft problems. Like, I'm just hoping and praying that we do the right things. We're really good at drafting 3rd round on. We're really good, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's kind of how you've been able to weather the storm, and even though you're 8-9, missing the playoffs in the tougher conference, you're having some really exciting games finishes to the season. They had a very dominant performance against Kansas City. Mm-hmm. That was kind of what really opened my eyes when I watched that live. Offensively, they were kind of a nothing burger, but defensively, they really handled Kansas City. And Kansas City almost came back and won, but really, Kansas City was in control the whole game, and 2 back-to-back defensive touchdowns kind of swung the favor. And you haven't really seen anybody in the league be able to do that to Kansas City. And so seeing the Raiders do that and getting some kind of confidence, Max Crosby kind of nudging Patrick Mahomes every time he's on the ground or knocking him a couple seconds after, just kind of getting in his head. That's what is the Raider way. And if you can just kind of go all into that mindset, I think they're a very sneaky team to make a lot of noise this offseason.
Well, we have a lot of young guys. Our secondary, our best players, not named Max Crosby. Our secondary has Merrick, Nate Hobbs and Robertson. Yeah, they're all really good players, So
yeah, I think they finished 15th defensively this year. That was the highest that I can remember in a long time. It feels like the Raiders were always a funnel, at least fantasy wise, to start your guys.
These guys,
but they're fine. That way. Now it's just figuring out the offense, and it seems like they love the old school mentality around the football, based on the touches that they Antonio Pierce would be giving Josh Jacobs and then Zamir White towards the end of the year. I'm not sure who they'd bring in to replace Josh Jacobs, or if they would just hand the reins to Zamir. But that just kind of seems like how they'll do. I love Michael Mayer as a tight end. Obviously, he didn't have the rookie years that Sam Laporta had, but he's still a guy that I think could be there for a decade, being very good player for you.
He's a good blocker. And that's something that we kind of overlook with tight ends. We talk about all the time. It's like, we want to see fantasy scores and stuff like that. But he's a good blocker. He can one-on-one block the ends and stuff, which is something that we don't get as often. George Kittle can do that thing. We watched George Kittle pancake Aiden Hutchinson, like that type of thing. Well, Mayer has that same type of ability. Yeah. So I'm excited. Well, I mean, I think, with our cap space, with our draft pick, if we can hit on some of these draft picks, we have 5 in the top 150. Like that's a big deal. So I think, we're moving in the right direction at least, and get our run game going again and whatnot. But yeah, so let's jump to the Super Bowl champion, Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City was considered down this year.
Yeah, this was their worst year.
Yeah,
under the Mahomes era.
We thought that other teams had an opportunity to beat them, but also at the same time, I thought a lot of teams were considered down. I mean, we had 3 weeks to the end of the year, we weren't sure who was going to win MVP. We didn't know who the most valuable player was in the league. Some of those things. Of course, Lamar ends up playing really well towards the end of the first 14 games don't matter as much as the last 3. It's all recency bias sometimes, at that point. But Purdy was an option, and even skill players. So that's kind of something that, Mahomes wasn't in that discussion as much, but there was a door left open, and Kansas City just jumped in and took it.
Right. And let's not gloss over the fact we can give Kansas City the flowers for the way that they won. It was impressive. Back-to-back, it's no joke. First time since 2004 when New England did it. But let's not act like they just hit a switch and just dominated the rest of the way. They were dogs in the last 3 games of the year. But they were able to outplay and control the game, at least for the AFC Divisional and Championship rounds. And then the Super Bowl, they really didn't have an answer until they had a fluky kind of turnover that kind of really sparked their mindset, and they were able to run with it. Took advantage of the opportunity. You can't ever blame somebody for doing that. But they're more vulnerable than it appears. You would think a back-to-back champion would be. And so while that I wouldn't consider them a team to beat going into the following year, it's really hard to win in this league consistently. And they've had an unprecedented 6-year stretch. But I feel like their struggles was kind of more of a sign, a telltale of what's to come in the future. Post Andy Reid, post Travis Kelce, that they're gonna take a step back eventually. But somebody's got to come up and take it, and nobody stepped up to the challenge last year.
Yeah, and so with this team, like you said, Travis Kelce is getting older. This team was predicated on their defense more than their offense. because they had so many woes on offense, receiver wise, he had too many drops. They brought guys in trying to fix the problems, and those guys didn't pan out. Except for, okay, Miko Hardman had like 3 targets in the last like 4 weeks, but catches the touchdown to win the game, has one big catch. Like, okay, yes, he showed up in the Super Bowl, but otherwise he hadn't panned out throughout his time there. Kadarius Toney was considered a healthy scratch in every game basically at the end of the year. So, they couldn't find a guy to help them in that regard. I don't know if they go to free agency this year to do that, but they're going to have to do something, or they do it in the draft like we expect. But they're going to have to do something in that regard to help them, find a guy that can catch the ball.
Yeah, because eventually when you are no longer on top of the mountain, you kind of have to reset into what you're good at. And right now, they kind of transition very well once they let go of Tyreek Hill, use the assets that they had to maximize their defense, and now their defense is, second yards allowed, second points allowed, really was the driving force behind the Super Bowl. On top of that, having the best quarterback in football helps. But eventually, those guys that you drafted are going to get paid. L'Jarius Sneed's walking out the door. I don't expect him to return. Willie Gay's a free agent. Mike Edwards, Drew Tranquill, several key players are not going to be there in a few years, especially. And so you can't keep everybody. And so once that kind of migrates out and you have to focus back to an offensive team, you need to have the pieces around him, because in the 2-3 years that Travis Kelce isn't there, who's going to replace him? And he is irreplaceable, but you still have to find something, because Patrick Mahomes is still going to play for another 10, 15 years.
Right.
So Travis Kelce is only going to be there for 2, if that. So Rashee Rice, very serviceable. Impressed with his, taking the baton and running with it. But I still don't view him as the guy that's just going to take over and he's the next guy.
Right. And
that's going to be there for the next.
Yeah, that's what we talked about a little bit on our first mock was, he was still a guy that came out in the 3rd round. He wasn't a first round guy. He was still, he just happened to fall into targets because no one else.
Default.
Yeah, no one else could do it.
He's the only guy that wasn't dropping passes.
Yeah, he was catching the ball. He's paid to do that. So that's something that I think, that's why addressing the first round at wide receiver, I don't know that Rashee will be the number 1 wide receiver in Kansas City. I think a lot of people are like, well, he's a guy I want in Dynasty, and all this stuff. And I'm like, I just don't know that that's going to continue if they actually get a receiver that is a high caliber player. He'll be a good number 2. Don't get me wrong. He's, like you said, he's serviceable. He'll probably be a good number 2, but there will be a point where I don't think he is the number 1 in Kansas City's offense, and it's going to surprise people. But it shouldn't be as surprising because he didn't fit the physical builds and things that we expect from a guy that is a number 1 receiver in this league at this point, at least. So
yeah, and obviously to me, the number 1 free agent in the entire class this offseason is Chris Jones. And Chris Jones doesn't put up the gaudy numbers, but he is absolutely the best defensive lineman in football right now. His 4th straight all-pro season, back-to-back first team. Just incredible player. He just shows up when it matters the most. Like, he was there forcing the incompletion on Josh Allen when Khalil Shakir is running wide open and ball's thrown short because Chris Jones makes the play. You had in the Super Bowl where it's in overtime and guys running open and Chris Jones forces an early throw to make it an overthrow. Like, those kinds of plays don't show up on the stat sheet, but that's the kind of player that he is, and they need to do all they can to retain him because, he did a whole after being franchise tagged last offseason, he had a holdout into the season, and they truly missed him, at least early on. And it took him a little bit to get back to form, but he did not miss a beat once he was a part of the roster again.
Yeah, and I think you're going to make some Rams fans mad with that, but that's okay. We're okay with it. But
yeah.
But no, I mean, honestly, like Chris Jones, I don't know how you block the guy. He's, a mountain. Walks around like a mountain, literally. So I think that you watch the games and stuff, and I've started to talk about this more because I think it's very important. But interior rush ability, pressing quarterbacks from the shortest points, and he is always in their face. His arms are he's got huge length. He's there to bat balls down. Like you actually need, like they do all those quarterback drills where you put brooms in the air. You need the brooms and you need to hold him high because he has that much length.
Yeah.
To knock balls down. So I think that Chris Jones, not just what he does in the run game because he's great against the run. He splits double teams. He can take multiple defenders, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm sorry, blockers. But what he can do against the pass is what really makes him the money. And this is that the league is predicated around.
And to me, you just kind of have to bite the bullet and overpay to keep him this year because so many teams have an insane amount of cap space, but the loss of him, the saving $20 million or whatever it's going to cost you to not retain him, you will not make up in the 2 to 3 players that you invest that money in for him, at least in the short term. And when we're talking about this Kansas City team, this legacy is going to last whether or not that they can do this three-peat. If they are the first team to ever three-peat somehow, some way, that is going to be worth every penny of the can you got to kick down the road and just not be able to buy anybody in 5 years because everybody's going to be remembering that three-peat decades and decades from now.
Absolutely. I think that, Kansas City, I think that's also what they're focused on, which is exciting. We always have the conversation of, greatest versus best. And I think that, at this point in time, of course, we should all believe that, and I hate to say it, but because we all hate him and love him at the same time, but Tom Brady is the best or the greatest quarterback of all time. Greatest quarterback of all time. But Patrick Mahomes, to me personally, is the best quarterback of all time.
Yes.
Just based on arm talent, ability, pressure, what he can do under pressure. I mean, if you just want to think about arm talent for a second, he threw the ball diving sideways, like 40 yards and 50 yards in the air to Tyreek on the money. Like he was probably 2 foot from the ground diving sideways. So you cannot say that anybody has the ability to do that but him. So I think that tells you everything you need to know about his arm. And then he knows how to win.
Yeah. That's what I was just about to say. He is just unprecedented winner. He knows how to win in the biggest moments. His best is always when it counts. And being 11-1-1 as a dog is just insane. That I can't even fathom that. And he's already on record paces in the playoffs for numbers. MVPs, he's going to have many more to come. And it's just don't get caught up in the moment of not appreciating how great he is. Another person that I would compare as a talent in recent years is Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers has not showed up in the biggest moments, and he doesn't have the hardware. I can't believe that as talented as he is, he only has 1 Super Bowl appearance, and he just can't get over the hump because he has not shown up in the best moments. And it feels like Mahomes is the opposite of that. And that's what I appreciate so much about him is just on top of what you put up, the numbers that you put up, you show up and show out when it matters the most. And that's why in every single playoff game that they were an underdog, I bet Kansas City money line.
Right.
Because I just can't bet against him, at least at this very moment. Maybe there might be a time comes that he might have to overcompensate and he'll struggle a little bit with turnovers or what have you because he's trying to overcome the lack of talent that he has. Because eventually that's going to happen. He's not going to win the Super Bowl or be in the AFC Championship every single season. So at least one would think. But we'll just kind of see what happens. I appreciate what he is, and I'm not going to ever root against greatness if it's done the right way, and he's done it the right way.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people dislike the idea that they're going to win again, and they're going to win again. You know, and so that's something we talked about with like Tom Brady. Like we didn't like him at the moment, but you have to look back and be like, wow, that's crazy. And I think here in this situation for me is I want to see Patrick Mahomes do well. You know, I want him to do well. And there's obviously like things where, I mean, he's from Texas. We're from Texas. He went to Tech. That's cool. You know, it's not that too far from us. Still a big state, guys. But
yeah, very, very low.
But so that kind of thing's cool to me. Like, it's cool to watch guys that from the same area, same, um, I don't know. That just gets exciting, like the young kid part of it too. And then also, you can't. Everybody wants to see them lose. The Taylor Swift thing wanted. People didn't want to see that, and I understand that because at times, like, I would just be like, it doesn't matter. Like, we're here to watch football, of course, but the NFL's a business. They're trying to make money, and they knew what they were doing. But yeah, at the same, like, he baffles me with how, of course, his ability throwing the ball, but also being able to take the step back and be like, hey, like, my defense we're going to win because of the defense today. And I appreciate them for that. And
and we're going to win in spite of the weapons that are not coming through for me. Obviously, Tom Brady's known for, at least in his Super Bowl eras, making Wes Welker and Julian Edelman and Deion Branch, these guys just kind of come over the top. Well, they actually also came through for him, making big plays in big moments. Mahomes isn't really having the guys that are stepping up in big moments outside of his tight end that's always done that, at least in these two recent renditions of Super Bowl champs. Obviously, you can bring in Tyreek Hill as a guy that was just incredible to watch with them. But yeah, it's incredible to think about.
Well, I think if I had to put money on anybody to do it, I think I'd put my money on the 3P. Because I actually don't think they'll have the best odds in Vegas. They should. And I don't think, because talent-wise on their team, they're not the best team. Talent-wise, top to bottom. That's what we talked about for the Super Bowl. San Francisco, every position but quarterback and maybe tight end. I don't know. That's a close one. But every position but quarterback, they're probably better. If not, definitely better. And so the fact that you look at, what one guy, one position can do, and truly talking about what an MVP is like, that is what it is right there. It's like, he's going to vault your team by 2 touchdowns.
Right. Yeah, and we'll get into later in the offseason prediction videos and what we say, but my outlook on it would be, I think it's more likely than not this was the last Super Bowl in the, at least, Andy Reid era of the Chiefs. And that may be crazy to say, and I might be wrong about that, but we have to realize that Tom Brady, he won 3 or 4 and then went a decade without winning another one. Like, he had 3 Hall of Fame careers in one. It's incredible. But he had a long dip between getting back and finishing strong. Obviously, there was 2 Super Bowl appearances that Eli Manning got the better of him, but it wasn't the same. And then once they really kind of hit a spark towards the end of the teens, once Peyton Manning was no longer, serviceable to an extent, that's when they really started their run again and had these 3 great runs. So I think that once Andy Reid kind of goes off into the sunset, I just want to see who's the next guy, because I think that's all the more important, in addition to Mahomes still being there, because it has to click in some way, shape, or form. And even though Tom Brady and Bill Belichick always butted heads, they still clicked until they can no longer be with one another. And so that's how I view it going forward.
They were great competitors, and that's why they butted heads, because they wanted to be the best. And I can always appreciate that. So, but yeah, guys, we really appreciate y'all coming and watching. I don't even know what podcast this is. This is like the 6th. We're in there. So
we're rolling now.
Yeah, we're moving. So we appreciate it. We'll adjust salary cap stuff for y'all as much as possible. But we really hope y'all come back and watch some more. Go and like, comment, subscribe, do all those fun things. Go check out our Discord. Go check out our other socials and stuff, because that building this community, building this discussion, because it's going to be a multi-year discussion where we're going to be talking about our opinions and then eating our opinions and then getting them right. And, it's not going to be perfect, and it's going to be fun. So we really hope y'all keep viewing and watching and being a part of it.
Right. Yeah. Just continue to engage with us. Like, subscribe, do all the things in the description below. Interact with us in every way you can. What are your thoughts on this division? Can Kansas City be the one to be the first three-peat? Who else is there that we're not even really talking about that can make some noise? Also, watch our previous division videos and our future ones and more to come. We have a lot of things going. The scouting combine is going to be taking place next week, so we're going to get going into that. And then free agency right after that, and then all that stuff is going to be happening. So there's so much to talk about, so much to discuss, and I can't wait to see what we have in store for y'all.
Yeah, and then the draft. That's the best part of the year, guys.
Oh yeah,
it's exciting. But yeah, so thank y'all. We appreciate it, and y'all have a good one.
Y'all take care.